Welcome back to another episode of War in Cali. In this episode, I'm going to detail a story of an OG mass Swan Blood. Now the mass Swan Bloods, they originated in the early 1970s and have several cliques repping the mass Swan identity. Some of the most known subsets of the mass Swans would be the 7-7 and the 8-4 mass Swans, along with a few other streets that they rep. Mass Swan Bloods are clicked up with the family Swan Bloods, which makes them one of the most deadliest blood gangs on the east side of South Central. But being surrounded by so many rival Crip gangs, the Swans have to put in a lot of work to keep their name ringing and to also keep their territory, with having rivals like the Main Street Crips, the Avalon Gangster Crips, and the East Coast Crips, just to name a few. Now in the 80s, it was a different ball game. It was wars going on all throughout South Central streets, with many Crip on Crip wars and also Crip on Bloods. Thousands of young people died during this time, and in LA, it was 1,500 homicides alone in 1982. So you can tell just off this, LA was a real dangerous place to live. And in 1982, the year of this crime I'ma detail, many gangs were eager to catch bodies. Most Crip and Blood gangs were only about 10 years old at most at the time, and most gangs being new, they were eager to make names for themselves, so back and forth shootings were never ending. On the evening of December 18th, 1982, 5 or 6 young men were shooting dice in the parking lot behind an arcade called the Family Arcade on San Pedro Street in East Coast Crips turf. About 6 p.m., Fred, the son of the arcade owner, walked outside to check out what was going on outside. As Fred walked back inside the arcade, he heard 5 or 6 shots from the direction of the parking lot. As he went out to see what happened, he saw 2 young men laid out. Kurt was holding his stomach, and Jimmy was lying on the ground unresponsive. Fred began to chase after the shooter with his own gun. He saw the shooter jump over a wall between the parking lot and a back alley and jump into a waiting car and drive away. A witness named Ivory was walking down the alley toward the Family Arcade. He was acquainted with Fred and some of the victims. He also was known in the area. He saw the shooter holding a gun and then fire several shots at the crowd. He also seen the shooter flee in the alley. The shooter was wearing a sweatsuit, and Ivory gave a full detailed description of the shooter to the police. A man named Craig was also among the crowd. He was shot multiple times, but he survived from his injuries. Jimmy and Kurt weren't so lucky. They were hit by gunfire. Jimmy received a fatal shot to the head, and Kurt died of a gunshot to the chest. Last witness at the scene named Robert gave police a big clue of what happened. Robert was among the crowd shooting dice when the shooter appeared and started shooting. Robert would say the shooter was the same person he got into an altercation with 3 weeks prior. Robert and the crowd shooting dice were from East Coast Crip, and the arcade was in the hangout for the East Coast Crips. Robert would identify Anderson from 8-4 Mass Swan Bloods as the shooter. Robert would say 3 weeks earlier, he was in front of Family Arcade when Anderson pulled out a weapon on him. Robert seen Anderson in the area and banged on him and said, "What's up, cuz?" Anderson banged back and said, "This is Bloods," and pulled out a strap. But that day, the situation didn't go any further. But 3 weeks later, Anderson got his payback. Police arrested Anderson the day after the shooting and found the same sweatsuit that he used in the shooting in his bedroom, along with other evidence. Anderson's alibi was that he was at home sick the whole day, so it was no way he could have did the shooting. Anderson's mom and sister would back him up on his alibi. Anderson's lawyer would say Robert and the rest of his witnesses were not reliable because they were all gang members. At trial, all Anderson's previous run-ins with the police would be brought up. They would bring up how he committed robberies in 1978 and in 1979 how he was arrested for assaulting Crips, even how he became an official Blood member at the age of 14. At the time of trial, Anderson was only 22 years old, but all the evidence pointing against him and the witnesses coming forth, he received a life sentence. Shooting was over 40 years ago now. Anderson is now 62. He was sentenced to death, but has been reduced to a life sentence. He's in Ironwood State Prison with no possibility of parole, and he's never getting out. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.